The South African Post Office has warned that the impact of yet another strike by its workers will be extremely damaging. This comes after the Communication Workers Union confirmed that its members will engage on a protected industrial action that's today and tomorrow, demanding salary increases that have not been forthcoming for the past 2 years. To talk more about the South African Post Office workers' strike, in studio I've got Aubrey Tshabalala from the Communication Workers Union. He's the General Secretary there. Good to have you, Aubrey. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the programme.
Good morning.
Right, so today all systems go. The strike is happening today and tomorrow.
Yes, certainly the strike is forging ahead today and tomorrow in a form that today you will be picketing all around the country except in Western Cape, where they will be marching to Parliament today.
All right.
And yes, tomorrow there will be 2 marches as well.
And I know that there was a meeting yesterday between the Post Office and your union. Obviously, no conclusion was reached. How did the talks go?
Well, we heard about the meeting from the media, but we were then called to a meeting by South African Post Office, including the board. We were not available at the time because we were outside the province. So we expected that the meeting will sit today at 1 o'clock to meet with some of the board members of the South African Post Office and as well as the CEO.
Let's talk about some of your demands. What are you wanting from the Post Office?
Well, you'll recall that the Communication Workers Union ended the strike in 2014 December after having engaged with workers. One of the things that were demanded then was the conversion of all workers into permanent position whom were casual up until for a couple of years, up until 22 years up until now, as well as the salary increases. So we are promised that there will be salary increases. Up until today, they have never been backdated for the remaining balance of those salary increase of 2014. 2015, they've just imposed the salary of 7% without an agreement. And now we are in 2016 negotiating for salaries in 2016, which they are not coming forward. So all those are the demands that workers are putting forward.
So when you look at the financial health of the South African Post Office, and obviously you know what they're going through right now, we all as South Africans know. I mean, if we just look at their financial statements I think it was the last financial year, 1.5 billion rand loss. This is a lot of money that has been lost by the Post Office, and there's from the new CEO, they're begging for money in every direction that he can to try and save the Post Office and try and bring it back up onto its feet, and saying that a strike like this could again hamper getting funds, if not cripple the Post Office. Does this not worry you at all?
Well, firstly, let us clarify that the public protector's report have vindicated us from being the ones that we have been blamed for the financial woes of South African Post Office. Actual corruption was the main source to cripple Post Office to this stage now, where it's in paralysis. But having said that, it is not correct to say that South African Post Office has no money. Yes, it might have no money, but it's a state-owned entity. And because of the lack of political will by the South African government, we don't see the Treasury coming forward to bail out the South African Post Office. Those are mere things that we need to look into and to respond to. So South African Post Office have been given bank guarantees by the South African government. That also does not help because it just put South African Post Office deep into the crisis of being in the debts and so on and so on.
Yeah. When you look at the financial situation, not only that government finds itself in, that the world finds itself in, it's not a normal situation. And I don't think there are many people at this time that are getting salary increases, that are struggling to find jobs at a time like this. Don't you think that as an entity, we should be working together to keep these jobs as opposed to try and ask for wage increases, cripple organizations? Don't you think we should be trying to turn it around together as one entity? You have a new CEO. We've tried to get rid of all the corrupt individuals that have been pulling the Post Office down for all of these years. Yes, you've been vindicated, and that's why you're still in your positions. But why try and make the situation worse?
Well, let's just clarify this again. Every year, South African government spend over 20 billion rands on private sector, on postal and courier national and international, without using South African Post Office. Two, we don't see any political will in local, provincial and national government to utilize South African Post Office as their sole institution to provide those particular services. Lastly, we have seen the announcement by the Department of Home Affairs wanting to use the three giants banks, which is Standard Bank, FNB and Nedbank, to provide the facility of ID smart cards. And that in itself, it shows that there's a lack of a will to rescue post office, because firstly, government should lead by example before the private sector come into place. So it can't be said that the money is not there, but the money is there, spent wrongly into a private sector, leaving the parastatal to collapses. But we further believe that some within the National Treasury wants post office to collapse, eventually to go privatization route, so that people can be eventually benefit out of it, and it will be few minority, and absolutely workers will lose their jobs. And that's why we have to stand up and rise these things sharply, because if we don't do that, we are going to face a serious crisis after this.
There is a threat. I mean, there has been a threat. There was a threat from during budgets and in the State of the Nation address, that those private entity, or those entities that are not performing, those public-owned entities, will be privatized. There is a threat out there. So again, I ask you, don't you think it's better to work as a team to ensure that that doesn't happen for the post office, and that it actually is one of those thriving public entities that we can look at and say, gosh, look, they did it, why can't we do it?
Well, from 2014, workers have been working tirelessly. And on a weekly basis, there have been reports on the newspapers that there is a threat that post office can be shut down, and simply because of the things that we are raising. So we've been working for the past 3 years without any strike, without any hindrance. But there's been a consistent threat that South African Post Office will be closed down. Why? Because there's a consistent of these bank guarantees that are given by the state that are deepening post office into a crisis. But more so, if I were to make some examples, you look at some of the wasteful expenditure that South African Post Office engage into, you'll find that they will leave their own building and go across the road into a shopping mall and occupy a space there where they will use as their outlets and pay a high rent. And there's a number of things. We can make examples at the Tshabalala Mall, where you have 500 meters away from Tshabalala Mall, you have a post office outlets. You can go to Boulders here in Midrand, the same thing applies. That happened across the country. So those are the things that we say that there should be a turnaround strategy to look into that question and to readdress it again.
Let's leave it there for this morning, but thank you so much for talking to us this morning. The post office strike going ahead today, tomorrow, marches to Parliament, Luthuli House, also to the post, I think it's to the police station in Hillbrow also happening, and then in the KwaZulu-Natal legislature this will be happening. Members, 6,500 members, 19,000 employees at the post office, so it's yet to see how many of those staff will participate during this strike.